Hi there, it's me, Teacher Mike from Phuket PALS. Welcome back to another GED video. Now, over the last week or so, a few subscribers from the YouTube channel have asked me the same question, so I thought I would address it in this video, like the kind, conscientious teacher that I am, okay? Now, the question was, well, the question related to the different question types in the RLA test and the Reasoning Through Language Arts test. A lot of students are kind of looking at random things online and they're panicking because there's so many different types of questions and some of them are a little bit different from what they're used to. So I'm going to, in this video, I'll kind of lay out for you some of the different question types that there are and kind of what to expect with those. Now, again, it's not an exhaustive list. You may see other ones, but this will give you a good idea to get you started. So analysis is a big part of the RLA test, and there are different types of analysis question. Now, analysis questions require you to break down information and reason how different pieces relate to one another. Now, think about if you read a story, an extract from a story in the RLA test, okay? An extract, a piece of prose. Imagine there are two characters in there, character A and character B, and their personalities and how they interact with the world around them. It develops throughout this short piece of prose. You might be asked to analyze the development of their characters. Okay, I might ask you to analyze why you think this occurred, or I might ask you to analyze what caused this to happen, or maybe even what the effect of what this was. Also, it might ask you to analyze the theme or the message of a particular story. You might even get asked to analyze what lesson can be learned, like the moral of the story. That could come up as well. Next, you might be asked a question about separating fact from opinion. Okay, so this will be in an informational text. A person will state something, and you have to decide whether it's a fact or an opinion. So is this a fact, meaning can it be backed up with real evidence? You know what I mean? Or is it just an opinion? Is it just an idea that has popped out of their head, a kind of subjective idea about something? So you have to decide what's fact and what is opinion. And these questions come up all the time. Next is identifying cause and effect. Okay, so this comes up again in informational texts and in the prose. So for example, in a prose passage, a character might lose their job. Okay, and it might ask you to identify the cause, what caused this to happen. Or it might ask you to identify what effects happened after this character lost his job. So these questions come up all the time as well in social studies and in RLA. It's an important thing to remember, actually. These question types are common between the RLA and the social studies test. So when you're kind of studying for this test, it's very good to focus on skills, because then it gives you a much broader, it gives you a much better chance to pass both the RLA and the social studies by studying pretty much the same materials. When you're focusing on skills, that is, and I'll give you some idea how to do that later. Okay, analysis continued. Inference questions, okay, inferring information. Okay, inferring is a smart way of saying that you reach a conclusion. Okay, so if you have to infer or draw an inference on something, make an inference on something, what you're doing is reading a piece of text. It could be fictional, it could be a piece of prose, or it could be an informational text, non-fiction. What you're doing is you're looking at that piece of writing. You're looking at that as a piece of evidence, and based on that information, what conclusions can you draw? What educated guess can you make about a particular idea that the question asks you? For example, in a piece of prose, perhaps there is a student who keeps on failing a test. Okay, it might ask you to make an inference on that student, about that student's life, based on the evidence presented, the evidence of them failing all these tests. So you might say something, maybe one of the answers is something like, the student is having a difficult time at home. You could probably, in many cases, you can infer that. If a student is failing and failing and failing, very often they might have problems in their personal life. Or the inference could be that this student is having to work hard to support their family. Maybe he comes from a lower socioeconomic background and he has to have 1 or 2 part-time jobs to contribute to the family funds. You could maybe infer that from a student feeling all the time as well. It could be anything. Next, you have to make comparisons. Okay, comparison questions. So perhaps there are two characters in a piece of writing, in the piece of prose, and they both are quite angry. Well, you might have to compare how angry they are, something like that. Or making a contrast. So maybe there are 2 military leaders in the writing, or it could be 2 managers of 2 different companies, and you might have to contrast their styles of leadership. For example, so maybe one manager is a lot more authoritarian or strict with his employees, with his staff. Maybe the other one is a lot more empathetic and kind towards his employees. So you have to kind of pick out the contrast between the 2. Next are application questions. Okay, this is using information presented in one situation to help you with another. And a kind of way to think about application questions is, imagine you're listening to a podcast about, I don't know, economics or economic theory. Then you meet your friends later on that day and you're having a debate about quantitative easing. I don't know, whatever it is. And you use, in that debate with your friends later that day, you use some of the arguments that you heard in that economics podcast earlier in the day. That way that's application. You're using the knowledge you learned earlier from a different situation to help you in the debate in a later situation. And there are lots of questions that practice this skill in the RLA. Then we have good old comprehension, everyone's favorite. Okay, a comprehension question asks if you understand the written material presented. The GED test makers expect that you are able to state the information on the test in your own words, develop a summary of the ideas presented, discuss the implication of these ideas, and draw conclusions from these implications. Okay, you need to develop these comprehension skills, develop your comprehension skills to understand what questions are asking you and to answer the questions quickly and accurately. Okay, so we all know what comprehension is, don't we? It's understanding the information presented in front of us. Okay, but how can we improve this skill? Okay, well, there's different ways you can do it, and you'll find a million different teachers tell you a million different things. This is just what works for me. You have to read often to improve your comprehension. Now, that doesn't mean just reading one particular thing. It doesn't mean just reading newspapers all the time. It also means like reading storybooks, reading short stories, reading magazines, anything you can get your hands on. And with the internet now, the internet is awash with good reading materials. However, you do have to be a little bit selective with them. So in terms of getting fiction and non-fiction in one place that are quality texts, I highly recommend commonlit.org, this website at the bottom, commonlit.org. It's a free website. It's absolutely wonderful. It has fiction in there, it has non-fiction, it has pretty much everything you need to really improve your close reading skills for the GED test. In here, you'll find text based on history, you'll find text based on pretty much everything. It's a huge website, it's totally free. You do have to sign up for it, but it's well worth it. I strongly recommend you get into Common Lit. Okay, so read often, and you can do that with Common Lit. Make sure you build your vocab. Okay, so have a Word document open or have a Google Doc or even a good old-fashioned notebook. Imagine that. And every passage that you read in Common Lit, make sure you make a note of that unknown vocab somewhere. And you'll see when you go into the Common Lit website, each passage has the difficult vocabulary is numbered. And then at the bottom of each page, it gives you that difficult vocab word and a definition. If I were you, I would make sure every passage I read, I make a note of that vocab in one place, and then just keep reading and rereading that vocabulary. Okay, you need higher level vocab for the GED test. Okay, and Common Lit will give you that. You'll find as well within Common Lit that you get to choose the grade level. So make sure that you're choosing articles that fit your reading speed and reading comprehension level. So if you go to grade 12 and you're finding them a little bit tricky, why not just go back, knock it back a few years, go back to grade 9 or grade 10, read what you're comfortable with. What you don't want to be, you really don't want, if you're reading one line and you don't understand 4 words, it's way too difficult. So go back a couple of grade levels and just build things up. Okay, read 10 articles from grade 9, then try a grade 10, see how you feel. And just keep building the vocab, keep building these comprehension skills, and that's what you need to do. Okay, it really, excuse me, it really is slow and steady wins the race when it comes to comprehension. Read a lot, read often, and read from a quality resource, just like Common Lit. Okay. Also, you have to be mindful of your reading limit and your reading tendencies. Okay, so what do I mean by reading limit? Well, everyone has a threshold that they reach with reading where they can't take anything more in. So when you're practicing with Common Lit, for example, really be mindful of that point you reach where it becomes kind of like your head becomes waterlogged. It becomes so packed full of information you can't think anymore. Is that after 15 minutes? Is it after half an hour? Is it after 45 minutes? It's worth making a note of this, a mental note, if nothing else. And that means as you keep practicing day after day, week after week, you'll notice that this reading limit begins to extend. Okay, you can read more often, and as a result of that, your reading comprehension begins to improve. So just be aware of your reading limit. If you feel yourself completely destroyed, you can't think anymore, just stop, take a breather, do something else, get away from the screen is my advice, okay? Do whatever you need to do, and then come back to it later on. Also, your reading tendencies. So if you find yourself just reading cartoons all the time, or if you're a news junkie and you only read the news, you need to be aware of that, because the RLA test is a combination of informational text and fiction, okay, and prose. Now, having said that, it's heavily weighed on the informational text side compared to the prose, but you don't want to lose lots of points when you do the prose and the test, or vice versa. So if you need to read widely, okay, you need to read from Common Lit is good. Read from quality news sources as well, like The Guardian is a good one, the BBC is a good one, and just read widely. Also, I would have a novel on the go. Okay, you really should be reading a novel extensively as well. I would read a novel for 30 to 40 minutes per day, and this can be done on your commute to work. It can be done at any time. You can break it up into 10-minute sections, 15-minute sections if you need to, but you just need that extensive reading practice just to improve your reading comprehension. Also focus on stamina, okay, and that comes with practice, okay. It's very similar to the reading limit point, okay. So the RLA test has a serious amount of reading in it. A shocking amount. Students come out of the test looking as white as a sheet, and they can't believe, they always say, I can't believe how much reading was in that. You need to have stamina for this. You need to be mentally tough and prepared, and make sure that your reading stamina is high, because you have a lot of it to do. So practice. Okay, also, as I said earlier, build up to harder texts, and this relates to what are called Lexial levels. Lexial levels, as you will see in Common Lit, the higher the Lexial level, okay, just look for Lexial level beside the passage. The higher the Lexial level, the higher the level of comprehensibility is, so the more difficult it is to understand. So you'll see that a grade 9 article has a lower Lexial level, and that's just a number, okay, it's a number you'll see. And then grade 12 will have a much higher Lexial level, like way over 1,000. Okay, so again, be aware of these Lexial levels and the grade levels, and make sure you're not reading something way too difficult, and make sure you're not reading something way too easy. You need to find that sweet spot in the middle to really push your reading comprehension. And when you become familiar and confident with the level you're on, test yourself, push yourself a little bit more, push yourself up a grade level, and take it from there. Okay, synthesis questions, that's the next question time. These look at information, and it's when you look at information and form a hypothesis or a theory. So in the RLA, you have the extended response essay. You have to look at 2 passages where 2 different people give a different argument based on a similar situation. You'll have to read both of those passages and then decide, synthesize the arguments, decide which of them you think is better supported, is stronger, and then you have to argue why you think that is the case. You have to form your own opinion based on that information. Then we have evaluation questions. So this is looking at information and asking basic questions about it. So evaluating the evidence presented. Okay, so the strength of an argument is a good way to think about evaluation questions. So someone presents an argument in a passage, and like in the extended response essay, you have to think to yourself, who wrote this? Who wrote this argument? So maybe it's an argument about health. Maybe it was written by a doctor. So if it's written by a doctor, you can evaluate that that's quite a strong position. It's quite a strong argument because doctors, yeah, they're knowledgeable. That's their area of expertise. So yeah, that would be my evaluation of it. Are they an expert in the field? Okay, so is someone making comments about global warming who is a football player? Okay, so obviously you can evaluate that their argument doesn't hold as much weight as someone who's an environmental scientist. Okay, are there any other reasons why you should believe this person? Perhaps this person has done maybe they have a kind of side project in which they focus on this area. Maybe it's not their first gig, maybe their second gig is some kind of, maybe they set up some kind of non-profit organization that focuses on this topic. So they would definitely have their argument would have more validity based on that. Is the evidence presented solid? So is the evidence presented, you have to evaluate whether that evidence is backed up with things like statistics, okay, academic studies and things like that. If it is, then it's a stronger argument. So you have to evaluate all of these different aspects. Another way to evaluate is, can you think of a better position? So if you read an argument and you think to yourself, what would be the opposite to that? Or could I actually rebut that? Again, it helps you to evaluate the evidence presented and find out how strong it is. Lastly, this is more generally about cognitive skills, okay? Cognitive skills include reasoning, perception, and intuition. You can increase your knowledge and comprehension by reading books, researching on the web, or watching documentaries. Okay, now having a study partner is useful. Many students tell me they find this very, very useful. Someone to go to the coffee shop with or go out for lunch with once a week and talk about various articles they've been reading or documentaries that they've seen, and just spending 30 minutes to 45 minutes really, really thinking about individual topics and just getting those wheels turning in the brain. So for example, like study partners that I've seen in the past have both read or watched the same thing and then asked each other questions about it. So you could do this with your friend or your brother and sister or whoever, and let's say you watch a TED Talk or you read an article of Common Lit, right? And then you can get your friend to ask you these particular questions to build cognitive skills. And you can use the same questions every time. Number one, what did I learn from this? How can I apply it to my life? Is the information accurate? How do you know? Why do you think someone wanted to present this information to the world? What were their motives for doing so? What is the most interesting thing you learned? Why do you find it so interesting? What's the main idea in the information? Do you agree with it? And why do you agree with it? What new vocabulary did you learn from the information? Okay, so these are 6 questions that you can use with a study partner after you've read something or after you've watched a documentary. And you can ask each other these questions about the same thing that you've studied, or you can do it on your own if you don't have a study partner, and you can answer these 6 questions in a notebook every time and really dig deep and expand your answers. And this will massively boost your cognitive skills, your thinking ability, your higher order thinking skills. These are the skills that are vital to get high scores in the RLA and high scores in all the other GED subject areas for that matter. Okay, so that's it for this video. I hope you found it useful. That's all from me, Teacher Mike from Phuket PALS. Have a good day, guys. Okay, bye-bye.